Here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Millennial Talk Tuesdays. It is great to be here on Blab and, of course, Twitter for our Twitter chat, Blab Collab, Millennial Talk Twitter. We have a really jam-packed, loaded with content. It's going to be a great conversation tonight. We're talking all things politics. I would feel weird starting off the night with anything but acknowledging the tragic event that happened in Orlando. Literally, my heart is throbbing for all of the family and friends and victims of the shooting in Orlando. My biggest condolences, my prayers, my best wishes go out to everybody who's been affected, and also the LGBT community. In Fort Lauderdale this weekend, it was Gay Pride Parade. There was a lot of well wishes, a lot of somber thoughts, but it was amazing to see the LGBT community really rally together and in such a terrible time come together in such a community and in such a beautiful way, sharing their love and appreciation for all of the support that the LGBT community has been getting, especially here in South Florida. I am coming to you from South Florida tonight, and we will definitely be touching on terrorism, gun control, and of course politics in our chat this evening. And I just couldn't start the chat without any other way by acknowledging Orlando and all of the victims from the horrible incident. My sister-in-law, or my soon-to-be sister-in-law, who is a trauma therapist, actually volunteered Monday after shooting, and she drove up 3 hours from Boynton to Orlando and was helping in any way she could with the victims and their families. She wrote a really beautiful article about her experience in Orlando, which I will be posting on my blog and sharing through the social channels. And the experience she had was is actually, my hair just started to stand up on my arms. It just gave me the chills and the goosebumps. So happy to share her story with everybody. Well, we are speaking about politics. Everybody knows that I am no political expert. And everybody knows that I do not like to necessarily share my opinion on who I'm voting for, so don't even bother asking tonight. But what I am happy to do, and what I am here to do, is be a vehicle, use Millennial Talk Chat to have the conversation about politics, to educate ourselves in any way, shape, or form about this election, things we may know, may not know, want to talk more about. I'm really happy to have a political conversation where we have representatives from both parties, both Republican and Democratic. Also, this is going to be a civil, nice conversation about politics and the election and the nominees and the candidates. It is not going to be a biased, one-sided conversation. Everyone, feel free to share your opinion, your thoughts, your frustrations, but there is no wrong or right in tonight's conversation. We are here just getting educated and also having a great conversation to maybe help us make a decision about who we do choose to vote for. I know I'm still undecided and very excited to have the conversation tonight with my wonderful guests. I have two of my guests with me already. We will have a third guest calling in. He's actually coming from another speaking event, so we will have to give him a proper introduction in just a few minutes. But let me tell you who we have here with us already. So happy to have everybody this evening. First, we have Mr. Clifton Brown. He is a politics columnist for the New York Observer and a communications executive based in San Francisco. He speaks frequently in industry groups on the state of the U.S. politics. Clifton was previously director of communications for a senior Democratic member of the U.S. House of Representatives, and you may have seen a lot of his articles on the New York Observer. I know I was reading all of your articles today, Clifton. I'm very happy for you to be here with us on Millennial Talk. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Chelsea, for getting my articles. My article counts up. I get paid depending on how many people read them. And so anything that you can contribute, please go read every article 15 times if you can.
Well, happy to help and happy to share. I'm sure we'll be sharing some of your more of your articles tomorrow as we have some follow-up conversations from the residual conversations tonight. Along with us this evening, we also have Katrina Jorgensen. Is that how you pronounce it, Katrina?
It's Jorgensen, but it's close enough.
Jorgensen. That sounds so much more official. She is the chairman of the South Carolina Federation of the Young Republicans. She is the former International Outreach Committee chair and Communication Committee chair for the Young Republican National Federation. And she's here with us this evening as well. Hello, Katrina. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. And thank you for saying what you did about what happened in Orlando. I think you definitely speak for all of us.
Well,
I agree.
Thank you. Yes, I just feel that, this is our first Millennial Talk chat since the Orlando shooting, and we have to keep the conversations going because we also have to keep our awareness up. It's a little scary to think that people going out and celebrating something like Gay Pride at such a wonderful club like Pulse, where there was such a community within that neighborhood, and one of the most tragic mass shootings that our country has seen. It's in everyone's front backyard now. And it's alarming and it's scary, but we all need to just be aware to look out for anything suspicious and also report anything suspicious because nothing can go overlooked at the moment. So my brother and his girlfriend were in Orlando yesterday at a Harry Potter exhibit, going to Harry Potter exhibit for the first time. And they said they could feel like this somber vibe in Orlando. And I'm sure it's going to be like that for a while. As we all heal from the tragic event. But let's get into it because we do have a lot of ground to cover. We're already almost 15 minutes in. So pull up your Twitter feeds, everyone. We will be sending out the questions via Twitter as well. I'm sending out Q1. Make sure to include hashtag Millennial Talk in all of your tweets for this evening. All right, so we obviously have so much ground to cover. I was putting together the script and putting together the questions, and I was like, where do I even begin to have 1 hour conversation? And we have such amazing experts tonight to pick their brain, learn from them, get inspired by them, and also, of course, infuse any questions you might have listening. Feel free to tweet them in or do them or send them in via the Blab. We won't be taking in callers tonight because we will have all the seats filled here on Blab. But let's get into it. So we're going to start off with a little bit more of a generic question before we just jump into terrorism. The historic nature of the election is one to not overlook. We have the first woman running for president. We have a candidate with no political or military experience. And we have had a lot of controversial comments and experiences, arise throughout this election thus far. We definitely you never could predict what Donald Trump will say. So just curious, right off the bat, I'm going to start with you, Clifton. I mean, what do you think that this says about where our country is today? Such change, such diversity, such extreme differences. What do you think that this says about our time and our country at the moment?
I think it says a number of things. The first of which is that finally, at long last and long overdue, one of our major parties is set to nominate a woman for president of the United States. That's a wonderful thing. The only downside is that it took so long. And on the other side, I think you see the end product of a generation or two of disdain for government on the part of many of the citizens and the Republican Party too, particularly, in which there is a real feeling that government is bad, government is wrong, and people looking for somebody who's not a politician. And they sure got that with Donald Trump, who has really no relevant experience as compared to any major party candidate in the history of our country.
And it's interesting because, obviously Donald Trump has no military or political experience, but he's doing so well in the polls and has really had a consistent lead throughout the election thus far. Katrina, I know you have strong feelings about Donald Trump. You could probably go on a tangent for the rest of the chat talking about how you feel about Donald Trump, which is so interesting because you are within the Republican Party. So what's your take on this? I'm sure you need to get it off your chest right out of the gate.
Sure. I guess we should start off with saying that I'm a vocal opponent of Donald Trump as leader of my party, as a presidential candidate. I don't think he has any business running for presidential office whatsoever. So that it makes it a little difficult for me to give you insight on that front, because I think that many millennials that are conservatives would agree. In fact, I didn't know anybody in the young Republican leadership that Donald Trump was their first choice. I think a lot of people got on board later, but pretty much way, way later when it looked inevitable. And even then, there's a lot of people that are either quietly or vocally dissenting against him being our candidate. I think I might be the only one who's resigned over it, but that was my choice and what I felt like I needed to do. So it is true that we're in a whole very unique situation. Hopefully that this is the last time we're in this kind of situation, that the populace is so angry about what's happened. And millennials definitely are feeling it. 2008 recession hit us harder than any other generation. If you were in a job hunt in 2009, then you definitely know what the recession felt like in a way that the baby boomer generation didn't feel. They may have had their savings wiped out. We had our entire job search put back 5 years. So there's an entirely different situation. For baby boomers tend to be pretty angry. Millennials just are so apathetic at this point that we don't believe that government works at all, particularly whatever kind of system we have in America right now. I think that's why you see a surge for Bernie Sanders. It's great that Hillary's the first woman nominated by a major party. She's not the first woman that got the nomination of a party for president. That actually happened way back in the 1800s, in like the 1860s, I think. So when women's rights were first a big thing. So she's not actually the first woman candidate to make a party nomination, but the first one in our recent memory. And so, that's great. And there was a woman on the Republican side. Don't forget, Carly Fiorina was in the beginning, and she did have a lot of millennial support. A lot of young women really appreciated what she had to say. Mm-hmm. So you've got this very strange situation, but millennials tend to, for the most part, Bernie Sanders is the candidate that's getting the most support out of our generation, and probably because he's the only candidate really, really speaking to our issues. So we're in a very unique situation. Our generation, millennials, are now bigger than the baby boomers. We actually have more power and pull if we show up and vote. So there is that to be said about it as well. So I think that you could actually see a major shift outside of what we think, because most millennials, 7 out of 10 millennials have negative views about Trump. So for the Republicans, we're in a really terrible situation. Hillary's not in that much of a greater situation. She doesn't have the support of our generation either.
Right. And with that being said, that leads me into my next question. Actually, if you have any answers generated for Q1 and you want to send them out via Twitter, go ahead. If I look to the right, I am not ignoring you both. I have another screen over here, which is my Twitter feed. So multitasking as we go about it. Well, and one of the things that I always think is that, politics has become such a difficult conversation, because whether you are for Trump or against Trump, or for Hillary or against Hillary, or for Bernie Sanders or against Bernie Sanders, if you have conflicting opinions with someone, it can really get into an uncomfortable situation. I've seen it time and time again. I've seen it from family members. I've seen it from friends. I've seen it from complete strangers. I also feel that I feel that Obama was a trendy vote. People really rallied behind him. Celebrities really rallied behind him. I think that, it was an amazing accomplishment for him to have been our president. I was actually at the White House when he got sworn in. It was a feeling like I've never felt in my life. It was absolutely revolutionary. But I would say that Donald Trump is the untrendy person to be rallied behind, because of some of the things that he has said and things that he has done throughout the course of this election. Do you think, and Katrina, I think you kind of hit on this, do you think that people who might be a Donald Trump supporter feel that saying that they do support him is really going to get them nowhere amongst their social scene or their friends, so they actually are not vocally standing up for, who they think should be the next president if they do think it is Donald Trump? I find that some of the people that, are suppressing the way that they feel because they don't want to get into a confrontation. I'm like, isn't this the United States of America? Aren't we all supposed to be, having the same goal here to get to our economy, our country, our future, our children's future to a better place?
and it may be that we run in different circles in politics. I notice that most Republicans will say that they are going to vote for Trump if they're planning on voting for him. However, it is either reluctantly or it is with a caveat, such as I'm voting for him because I'm never Hillary, or I'm voting for him because I'm worried about the Supreme Court. They're not voting for him because they like him or they think he's a great candidate. And obviously, this is not true 100% across the board. It just seems that the people that I know in politics that I've worked with for a long time that are young and conservative tend to, if they say, and I would say that it's at least 50-50, that 50% are reluctantly going for, maybe 10% are in, and the rest are vocally opposing. So for me, it's not that people are saying, one thing and then secretly they're going to vote for Donald Trump. Usually they say, well, I'm going to vote for him, but that's because Hillary's worse. Or I think that, mostly Hillary's worse. Or I'm really worried about the Supreme Court. Those are the number one things. And I don't think that's a good enough reason to vote for a candidate, but that's the place that we're at right now.
Mm. Clifton, what do you have to say to that?
I think that we are seeing that to some degree on the Democratic side as well. There are a number of Bernie Sanders supporters who are not enthusiastic about Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a lot of, well, at least she's not Donald Trump, or we have an opportunity to get the majority on the Supreme Court now. So I think that those are very crucial drivers. But what we have to understand is that we don't always get a choice between two people that we really, really love or admire. And sometimes you've got to go with the candidate who you dislike least.
Mm-hmm. Lesser of two evils.
Right. All right. Well, I just sent out question 2, and we are definitely segueing into this question. So both Trump and Hillary, and I'm putting this in quotes, are unpopular in a sense that Hillary is currently going through an FBI investigation, and Trump, Trump is Trump, and, he's not always politically correct, or he's, outlandishly honest or in his approach or thought process. Sometimes, it's like, where is the censor? What does this say about how people will think of the future president? I mean, most likely it's going to be Hillary and Trump, right? We know that Bernie Sanders is still running, but it's looking like it's Hillary and Trump. One of these people are going to be the president of the United States. It's either going to be someone who's being called racist or sexist or people threatening to leave the country if he's president. And then you have someone who's literally being investigated by the FBI. To me, this is like a scary thought of the people who are potentially supposed to be the leader of the country. Clifton, is there a way for you to make me or us feel better about either or of these nominees and the reality that one of them is probably going to be our leader? What do you think? I get flabbergasted at the thought of it. It's like, really, it's unbelievable. Like, how many people are there in the United States, talented, smart people in government? And these are the two people who are neck and neck.
Well, I'm one of those people who is actually a big fan of Hillary Clinton. I think she's extremely qualified, perhaps one of the most qualified candidates in American history for the presidency. I'm not particularly a fan of Donald Trump. But then again, I think that we have bipartisan agreement on that on this show tonight.
Clearly. Katrina, what do you think?
I think that now is the time. I don't have anything positive to say. I'm sorry. I think now is the time that if ever there were a chance for a third party to come in, that would be what happens. I think I've noticed that some people in the chat have brought up why I haven't mentioned Gary Johnson. I think now is the time to mention him. There is a interesting point where both Republicans and Democrats, particularly in the millennial generation, may have things they agree with Gary Johnson on. And so he probably has the best chance now that I've ever seen of getting 10% or more of the vote. I'm not saying he's going to become president. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying that you may see the rise of the third party. There's a potential for other smaller parties to rise as well. You've seen, if you're in the political sphere, you'll see some of the people that are never Trump. One of the guys leading that up is Bill Kristol, and he's been pushing the concept of picking a totally outsider candidate to run as a dark horse. There's also a push within the Republican Party to unbind the delegates. So, that's how the candidate is actually technically selected. He's the presumptive nominee, Donald Trump, right now. Same with Hillary. They've got enough delegates to count towards being picked by the party. However, there are some Republicans that are pushing that we don't pre-decide, the states don't decide who their delegates are voting for. And so they could go in and vote for whoever they wanted. And that person could be Mitt Romney. It could also be, a celebrity. It could be Brad Pitt. It could be anybody. They could go in and vote for whoever they wanted. So that's being discussed. The other thing is the Green Party still exists. And there are a lot of millennials that feel very strongly about the environment, and this could be a chance for them to get somewhere. But I think that out of any of if we're going to be serious about it, the best chance is definitely the Libertarian Party. Most millennials have a little bit of a libertarian streak in them. We don't want anyone to be in our business. We're not interested in the government being in our stuff all the time. We tend to be pretty liberal on social issues, but some of us can be more like me, like myself, more conservative on economics. So you've got that. You've got the issue of legalizing marijuana, which obviously the libertarians have the most progressive view on. You've got stuff like that. So the libertarians might pull votes. The only reason I wouldn't see them getting a big chunk of the electorate this time is that I think there's a big risk that millennials are just apathetic and just don't show up and vote. The candidates they want aren't there, so why go to the polls? What you were saying earlier about Barack Obama, he really energized a generation, and he had a really good system in place to do it. And I don't think that Hillary has managed to tap that system in the same way. So if Bernie gets out, a lot of people will be like, my candidate's gone, why should I vote? And they'll go home.
I found it really interesting to look at some of the recent polls that were done, and there was an NBC poll of which one of the following issues matter most. And for everybody listening, chime in. I want to know which out of these issues matter most to you. You have, and the issue that matters most is jobs and the economy across all parties, Republican, Democratic, and Independent. Then you have terrorism. Then you have healthcare. Then education. Then the environment, immigration, foreign policy. With that being said, I want the first question about a social issue at hand, or not just a general question about the nominees of the candidates, to really be about focused on the economy. So let's talk about the economy. One of the biggest concerns for the millennial generation is definitely the economy. How do you think, Clifton, your party and or candidate of preference for the political election is going to try to improve the economic future for millennials over the next 4 years?
Well, I certainly think that two things that are going to be very serious focuses for the Democrats and for Hillary Clinton going to be a raise in the minimum wage and student loan relief, both of which are crucial issues to millennials, obviously. A minimum wage, I mean, for a certain segment, obviously, when you're first starting out, you're going to be probably at the lower end of the scale. You might not be minimum wage, but you might. So that's a big deal. But the thing that's really going to be a big thing is student loan relief and how that gets dealt with. I'm not going to tell you how long ago I graduated from college, and it took me 18 years to pay off my student loans. And I didn't have nearly as much in debt as a lot of people are coming out of college with today. So this is a huge issue because, where you start has so much to do with where you finish. We see now so many people, living with their parents into their 30s. In part because, they have so much debt, and also in part because you don't have the kind of jobs opening up the line because people are working longer and retiring later. So these are going to be crucial issues. And that's why really issues such as Social Security, believe it or not, are going to matter to millennials, because you want older people retiring as soon as possible so those jobs can open up for people who are coming out of school.
It's unbelievable how student loan debt has such a ripple effect on not only our generation, but also into the economy. And I actually have a question structured for later in the chat, but we can definitely dive into student loan debt more, being that you just brought it up, Clifton. But Katrina, I would love to hear your response first before we kind of take a little bit of a deeper dive into the student loan debt crisis.
Sure. Remind me, you were talking about the economy, specifically about the issue of jobs.
The Republican Party, obviously, you have Trump kind of at the forefront right now, but from the Republicans' perspective, what do you think that the party is looking to do to help improve the economics, footprint right now, and also over the next 4 years, being that it can't get any worse. We have to only get better at this point.
let's take a moment to note that honestly, when it comes to some of these issues, it may not be the president making those calls; it'll be Congress. So this is when, even if you don't like who's running for president, please still go vote, because the people down ballot matter too, and they are probably making more calls on your life. And if we're going to I'm going to throw it out there because it's a pet issue of mine, vote all the way down the ballot, because the person who is your county commissioner, that person has more impact on your life than Congress does any day of the week. So make sure to go vote all the way down. And so with that out of the way, let's talk about, let's ignore Donald Trump. God knows what he thinks anyhow. We'll talk about what Congress thinks, and things like Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House, who's a Republican right now, what he has to say about issues. So one of the main things that our generation across the board is very entrepreneurial, whether that's actually starting our own company, or whether we want to be independent contractors, or just be able to pick what we do with our lives, however we do it. There are, Republicans' views on this is that we should lower the economic barriers to getting involved however you want to be in the job market, whether that's working part-time or whether that's having your own company. So there are a lot of unfortunate bureaucracy restrictions. If you've tried to start a company, you know this. Anything from a small consulting business where you just have to pay a fee, to running an entire restaurant where there's all kinds of issues you have to deal with, and bureaucratic problems and different agencies, and it's just a mess, and it's too difficult. And I think actually both sides of the aisle would agree that there are too many barriers to being able to work the way that you want to. So Republicans have really tried to focus in on this. How can we lessen the burden so that people can start companies, or that people can take home more of their money, so that your tax burden is lighter at the end of the year? I think these are the kinds of things that conservatives focus in on the most, and the sort of common sense solutions that people like Paul Ryan are trying to bring into Congress. And there is a lot of reaching across the aisle. I want to be clear that there's Democrats that are willing to work. That's one of the things that I'm the most worried about in the presidential race, is that if you have a combative president, that can cause a combative Congress. And so I hope whoever is elected works harder to bring Congress all to the same table, so that we can get some of those things decided on. I'm not saying that student loans, which we're going to talk about later, is a legitimate issue. Again, I'm just going to say that's Bernie Sanders is hitting that on the nose. But this is something else that I think maybe doesn't get talked about enough. That there's a lot of people in our generation who really want to own their lives. And the solutions aren't there that were for our parents. It's not like you get a 9-to-5 and you work for 30 years and then you get to retire. Those options do not exist for us anymore. So we have to find a new way to do it. And I think that Republicans want to find
really great points. And it's so interesting that you bring up the entrepreneurial spirit of this generation, because we really are. And we also have so many more capabilities, software tools, platforms to be able to build our own brand, build our own business, monetize multiple different avenues thanks to social media, and being able to aggregate and build your own community, dictating your own influence today. So it'll be interesting to see as millennials become older, wiser, more mature, and more deeper into the workplace. If once they start to realize the challenges or barriers they have in starting their own business, because many millennials don't necessarily want to work for the man. If they'll be that much more attuned to listen or vote down the ballot, like you said, or pay attention to the people who are also in Congress. Katrina, I think that's such an amazing point, and I'm going to admit here, I don't really know who's running for Congress. I didn't even think to.
Don't feel bad. You're one of so many
Scout's
people.
honor. I wouldn't have even thought to include it into the conversation, and so happy you brought it up. Being that you did bring it up, is there anything from both parties that we could educate people listening about, people running for Congress, or people you think are, potential people who could help pioneer change in a good, effective way for the next election? Clifton?
There are so many different people running in all of these offices. I'd hesitate to pick any particular one. I'm pretty tuned into what's happening here in California, where we have two Democratic candidates for the United States Senate who both qualified for the general election, Kamala Harris and Loretta Sanchez. And I think that either one of them is going to be interesting, in that we are going to be electing an ethnic minority female to the United States Senate that's such a rarity. So that's something that really is inspiring to me, speaking as a Californian.
Mm-hmm. Clifton, being that you are a Hillary fan, what do you think, I know that Hillary has definitely announced some action steps to help bring more jobs into the economy. Is there anything that you could, bring to light through in our blog right now for things that you know that Hillary is looking to do to help stimulate that, in particular, bringing more jobs to the American people?
Well, I think she has a very fine line to ride, because certainly you can't go absolutely battering the business community if you want business to be done. But on the other hand, she's got a lot of pull on her left from the Bernie Sanders fans who want to clobber Wall Street. So I think it's going to be very tricky, whatever she's going to do, but I think it's going to be more along the lines of trying to stay the course that we've seen over the past 7.5 years. We have seen great economic growth. So I don't expect any major departures from Hillary Clinton if she becomes president. I expect that she will continue a lot of the Obama administration's economic policies and try to ride that fine line between her party's left and between the Democratic Party's business wing.
There's a lot of chatter about Hillary's kind of just going to be like the extension of the Obama administration. She has said things and then retracted certain things, which kind of make it a little confusing at times. But, hey, we're all human. We could decide something and then, decide to go against it, although it can be a little confusing to follow. But how do you feel about, certain initiatives that the Obama administration has put into place that Hillary is still going to, carry through? Which ones do you think are worthy to carry through, like possibly Obamacare or not Obamacare, that you want to see continue to move forward versus, things you want to put the kibosh on?
Well, I think that there's no question that a President Clinton would carry on with the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. Democrats support it, Republicans oppose it. It's as simple as that. It's interesting that it was originally a conservative plan, which was created by the Heritage Foundation and put into practice by Governor Mitt Romney of Massachusetts. So it's really a very moderate plan in some ways. No question it's had its share of bugs. As any program does, Social Security also had its share of bugs in the 1930s when it was implemented. But certainly that's going to be something that will be carried on, and there aren't going to be the votes to override a presidential veto if Republicans control Congress and try to get rid of it, as they've done on many occasions. So I think we see that go forward. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens in terms of free trade, which Hillary Clinton has been pressured to come out against. Even though the Obama administration supports it, it'll be interesting to see if there's a divergence there, if in the end, after all the rhetoric, she ends up going forward with it, or if she ends up hewing more toward the rather ascendant left wing of her party.
Katrina, how do you feel about some of Hillary's initiatives that she's looking to carry on from the Obama administration, and also your opinion on the Affordable Care Act? Do you think that's, helping this generation, future generations? What's your stake in that in particular? Of course. Yes.
Chelsea, do you mind if I go back real quick to the Congress comment that you made a moment ago? I would just encourage people to go, whichever party you're interested in, or both parties. I'd say go to your local county's party website, see what events they're doing, go meet your congressman, and then vote for them. Meet the people who are running. Most states are finishing up their primaries at this point. Go talk to those people. Go to a town hall. They do them too. And they do them for lower level people too, for your county and your mayor, and all of those offices count. And people, if they won't talk to you, you probably shouldn't vote for them, but most of them will take the time to at least meet you and go over an issue if you've got a specific question. And even if you don't have one, I would say just go and listen. See if it's somebody who you would vote for. Go read their platform. Don't wait till the day before you vote to go do it either. So that's what I would just encourage you to do. Every state and region has their own issues that are important. So, definitely go check that out. Okay. And then sideline into the Affordable Care Act. Obviously, Republicans have had a huge issue with this. Feel like it's socialized Medicare. But I think one of the biggest problems with the Affordable Care Act is that it didn't fix any of the problems that already existed and then built an entirely new gigantic system and just laid it over and didn't address any of the issues that were already happening and then just kind of continued on. So I think that the intention was really good and that the implementation was terrible. And so I think that obviously every Republican has said they're going to repeal and then put in something new in place of it. I don't believe anything Donald Trump says, so I don't know if he actually is going to do that. He says it, but he'll probably change his mind. But Congress definitely wants to now, and Congress have been promising, Republican-held Congress have been promising it, and they've been promising something they couldn't deliver because, of course, Obama was going to veto somebody taking out his entire plan. So I think that was completely unrealistic for Republican voters to expect that to happen. It was never going to happen. But if we had a Republican president in office, then it could be repealed. If Hillary's in place, I absolutely do not think that is what's going to happen. I hope to God, though, that if Hillary does come into office, that she fixes the VA, because that's the absolute number one thing. Our veterans, the people who have gone overseas and fought for us and have participated in wars that they might not have agreed with, those people absolutely need to be taken care of before anyone else. So I hope that she'll follow through on her promises to fix that, because I think Obama's done a terrible, terrible job
More great points.
taking care of the people that have protected us.
I think in fairness to President Obama, that this is a problem that existed before he came in, and it's going to take more than one president to clean it up.
That's probably true. I wish he had done more, in the sense that when we're going to try to keep it civil. When you had a major situation like what we had with the VA in the last years, and you only have like 2 people get fired, that's not good enough. I don't think that's how you reform an institution like that that's obviously underperforming.
Oh, okay, so it's good. Look, we agree on things as well. Well, jumping into another very controversial topic, I think we're about to like blow up the Twitter sphere even more. But we are about to talk about gun control, and especially being, just a little over a week off of the Orlando tragedy, we have to talk gun control, and especially it is definitely a big topic of discussion right now. So senators could not muster enough bipartisan support to pass this series of gun control measures. Just Monday, the latest in a long string of failed attempts at enacting tighter curbs on firearms in the United States. Spurred by the worst mass shooting in U.S. history, senators from each party introduced measures they said would have strengthened background checks and prevented suspected terrorists from obtaining weapons. The thing to wrap your head around right now is, if there were stronger security measures in place, would the shooter in Orlando not have been able to obtain firearms? He was listed as a potential threat at one time, and it was removed from the list. So the executive director of the NRA, Institute of Legislative Action, Chris Cox, today issued the following statement in response to political maneuvering in the U.S. that prevented the passage of legislation to prohibit terrorists from obtaining firearms. He said, "Today, the American people witnessed an embarrassing display in the United States Senate. President Obama and his allies prove they are more interested in playing politics than addressing their failure to keep Americans safe from the threat of radical Islamic terrorism." Before we jump into the question, Clifton, being our representative from the Democratic Party, how do you feel about Obama's reaction to gun control, and especially that quote in particular?
I think that whenever we hear about, something's being politicized, it's because the side that's complaining about something being politicized doesn't want to do anything about the problem. And so I think that we have a lot of accusations being slung around, but let's face it, this is a political issue. So of course it's going to be politicized. We have people who are being gunned down in their dozens, and all over weaponry that is military-grade weaponry that really should not be in the hands of civilians. The Second Amendment, every constitutional premise has common sense limitations. The First Amendment has common sense limitations. You can't libel, slander. You can't threaten the president's life. And we have gun laws that regulate whether you can have a sawed-off shotgun. You can't. Whether you can have an automatic weapon. You can't. So what's the difference between that and getting other military-grade weapons off the streets? It's a distinction without a difference.
Katrina, how do you feel about that quote, and in regards to Obama's reaction or lack of reaction to this issue in particular?
The issue of guns is a very emotional one for both sides of the aisle. So I think that both sides have called for it, that the other side is politicizing the issue. The other side has not even waited till the blood's dried to make this emotional and get their issue out there. And honestly, that's a pretty accurate criticism. Some people don't wait. As soon as they see an issue that talk radio probably made this happen for both sides. As soon as something happens, we jump on it and we make it, so that we can talk about it and the news is all over it. And then they have to get each pundit to come over and give their sides. And it's very unfortunate. And I think that it's a tragedy of the 24-hour news cycle that this has happened. That being said, I think that what happened in Orlando is, of course, a terrible tragedy. The problem is that I think no matter what we do, there is a limit on what we can prevent, unless we do totally repeal the Second Amendment. That we got rid of all guns, then maybe we'd prevent it, but then there would still be stabbings. I just don't think that there's and a lot of gun owners feel very much like there is a slippery slope argument that you start taking away some guns, and that if you do background checks that should have worked out, that's those systems are already in place, and you can't always stop lone wolf domestic terrorists. This guy was obviously incredibly disturbed, and you can't, the FBI was trailing him, but I think there's only so much you can do without infringing on people's personal freedoms. We saw that after 9/11, where there was a lot of problems with infringing on people's privacy. And so we're trying to walk that delicate balance all the time, and it's very, very difficult. When is it that you listen in more to somebody because they're a threat? When do you take them off a list? How long have they been on, in the sense that, and they haven't done anything bad so far, so when are they okay to go again? And it's, the FBI has been reviewing what they've done and what they did, listening to this guy and watching him and following him and checking him out, and they felt like they did the right thing even after going back and reviewing. And I think there's only so much you can ask. It's such a difficult situation, and honestly, particularly the fact that it happened in an LGBT type situation that happened at a gay club, and it involved a Muslim. You have two of issues that people are so emotional about clashing along with guns. I think it's be very, very hard to extricate ourselves from the emotional part of this and make a decision that's logical. And I worry that we may try to legislate while we're in this state, as
Listen, you were shaking your head at one point.
And we have all the facts.
And I mean no disrespect, but if you've seen the movie The Untouchables, Sean Connery's character is telling Kevin Costner's character how he's going to get Capone, and he says, they pull a knife, you pull a gun. I mean, a gun that can fire off hundreds of rounds in a few seconds is more lethal and more dangerous than a knife. Yes, you can kill with a knife, but you got to get up close. You can kill people from a distance in great numbers in a very short amount of time with an AR-15. So that argument I find a little not the best analogy, really. But that's just my take on that. I really think that nobody's talking about repealing the Second Amendment or taking everybody's guns away. I come from a family of hunters. All of my uncles had guns. It was very commonplace in my family. It wasn't an issue, but they had, single shot rifles. We're not talking about guns that you can go into a school and mow down 20 school children within 15 seconds.
Yeah.
I mean, that's accurate, but at the same time, you've got, so you take away guns, but then people can still make bombs. And those are made with items that you can find in your household. I mean, I don't think that by saying, if we get all guns, we're going to get rid of this. There's also been a number of massacres that have occurred with knives. And I don't want to get deep into it and start throw out when it's happened and the different locations and how it's happened in Central Asia and things like that and start listing off dates. But I mean, you can get in. That's why it's such a difficult topic to discuss, because then you can get into this level of thing. I mean, the same thing with the bombs is if you take away people's ability to make homemade bombs, then you start regulating items that we need in farming. I mean, there is a difficult balance, and to be totally honest, I'm not sure what the right answer is, and that's why we elect people that we think either have resources that may be better or have access to more advisors than us to make the right decision when it comes time to vote on the Senate floor.
This conversation is one that's so complex. It's not a black and white type of conversation. It's not a one size fits all model. The solution is if there is ever a solution, that would be a great day that everyone can agree on, especially if we can make the solution a safer solution for all of us. However, there seems to have to be some sort of action that we take. I don't think us sitting back and doing nothing is, one, really going to make the American people feel safe, and two, going to make our enemies think that we are serious about taking action against them and making sure that we are going to protect ourselves as well as, the American people. So with that being said, do you think that we will ever see somewhat of a compromise by both parties to extend potentially the review period for those who are on the watch list? Not necessarily repealing the Second Amendment, not taking every single gun away from every single person, but potentially making the process of obtaining a gun, getting a gun, that much more thorough, that much more scrutinized, that much more hard, so that if somebody isn't, a clean person, it's going to be harder for them to obtain a deadly rifle. Clifton?
Right now, the gun lobby has so much power and influence, so much money, that I don't see anything happening. I really do not see a bipartisan solution in any way. Not only do you have almost no Republicans who would be willing to do this, but there are a handful of Democrats in socially conservative districts as well who would have a hard time going along with this. So I really, as things stand right now, do not see much hope, if any hope, for any kind of solution that you're talking about.
Katrina?
I would agree, except I would say it's less to do with the gun lobby, and that there are a lot of voters who are not willing to give up their guns. That there's just so many Republicans who feel incredibly strongly about this issue, just average voters, that are never going to let their Republican candidates live it down if they were ever to vote against.
Clifton, you wrote an article about
their gun rights,
and there was a quote or stat within the article that was like, whoa, and alarming. The gun lobby's spending of nearly $52 million has kept Congress from weighing in, while almost 1,500 people perished in the free fire zone that is today's America. Can you give us a little bit more of an understanding of that scope of stat? What does that really mean? Give us a little bit of history on that.
Well, what I did was, over the course of the last two election cycles dating back to 2013, was took a look at the spending by the gun lobby, both on direct contributions to political campaigns and lobbying Congress. And that's where the $52 million number comes from. And I looked at the number of people who were killed in gun massacres. And essentially, what that comes down to is, if you want to put a price on it, it came to about $34,900 per human life in these gun massacres. Now, that's not a way of looking at it that I think anybody would like to look at it, but maybe it's the way we ought to be looking at it.
Well, we did touch on terrorism. I feel like gun control definitely comes along with this conversation as well. There was another poll that was done, and 1 in 4 Americans ranked terrorism as a top issue. So it seems that terrorism and the economy are definitely at the forefront of everybody's of mind, and thinking about what is the next president of the United States going to do to make us feel more secure about these two issues in particular. There was a Gallup poll that was done about Republicans and Democrats' interpretation on the Orlando incident. And interestingly enough, 79% of Republicans described the Orlando incident as an act of Islamic terrorism, where 60% of Democrats interpret it as a domestic gun violence. Speechless again. So, Clifton, coming from the Democratic party, what's your opinion? Where do you draw the line today? What's your thoughts on that Gallup poll?
I don't know how much real proof we have that this man was in any way really seriously involved with any kind of overseas terrorist organization. Supposedly he claimed guilty to ISIS, but who knows what his real ties with that organization were, if any. I think this is more of a domestic terrorism incident from a guy who very clearly, as I understand it, had some not only mental issues, but possibly some issues with his own sexuality, and decided to take it out on the people in this club, which is deplorable. But I don't really think this is a radical jihadi issue so much as a person who is mentally balanced and very troubled about his own sexuality.
Katrina, what is your opinion?
It's similar. I think that what we saw based on the transcripts that were released of the call and also the things that the FBI had said formally, this was a guy who during the call both pledged his allegiance to the leader of ISIS, but also, and this is an area of expertise for me in the foreign policy issues. So there's another organization in Syria that's also operating called Al Nusra Front, and he also said that he felt solidarity with them. Those two factions are at war with each other in Syria. So it's a little difficult when you look at and that's just one conversation. And then they said that formerly he had pledged to Hezbollah, which has also been kind of like iffy in that whole situation as well. So this is a guy who obviously wanted to be part of something. And I'm going to be careful. I don't want to try to psychoanalyze a person that I have zero connection with. But it looked like somebody who wanted to be part of something bigger than themselves, which we see a lot in these lone wolf kind of attacks. At the same time, it doesn't look like, based on the information that is currently available to the public, I should say, it doesn't seem like he was connected in a larger way to an organization that was planning it through him. It looked very much kind of like a copycat attempt or something like that. I mean, this was a troubled individual. Yeah. It may have been because of his sexuality. That's a really weird part of this. It did seem very much like there was an element of a hate crime against gays, which is just so tragic. You would think that at the place we are, on both sides of the political sphere, that we'd be past that. So that, that was terrible. I think this was just somebody who was looking to act out in some way, and he was, whatever.
Tragic and confusing, and it's so I feel like it's so much more than it's just a terrorist attack. It's so much more than just an issue about gun violence. It's also a hate crime. It's also an attack on a whole community, and it's just a tragic on top of tragic event.
And I think we should be careful about not labeling this as terrorism without saying domestic terrorism, because I don't want to lighten like terrorist activities like beheadings that happen overseas, where we've lost Americans, journalists who have been, on film beheaded by terrorist organizations. So I want to be very careful. Obviously, this is incredibly tragic. 49 people died and so many injured. It's the worst attack that we've seen on our own soil. And definitely, but this wasn't, it is still a different kind of attack than 9/11. So I just think that it's important to make the distinction that while this was horrible and violent and is definitely domestic terrorism, and I think that there are multiple ways you could describe this as a hate crime, it is not the same thing as full-blown terrorists.
I couldn't agree more.
So with that being said, Katrina, obviously you do stand within the Republican Party. You know that you are not a Trump supporter, but that doesn't mean you're jumping ship out of the Republican Party. So terrorism is a threat facing every American in the United States today. What action do you believe the Republican Party or preferred nominee at this point will take to make the country a safer place? If, I know you are not a Donald Trump supporter, but if Donald Trump does become the next president of the United States with, his lack of foreign policy experience or military experience, I just am so consumed at the thought of not only, how is this country going to react to someone with such little experience running the country, but what about all of the, radical Islamic terrorists or other, terrorism groups who are looking at our country with a leader potentially who doesn't have experience in foreign policy. I just feel I'm scared at that thought. I mean, so what do you think?
Sure. This is actually one of the things that troubles me the most, potential one of the many reasons that I pulled out of supporting Donald Trump, as foreign policy has been an area of interest for me for a long time. And I had focused on the post-Soviet space, as well as being the international outreach chair, and served in multiple positions for the National Young Republicans, doing work with our conservative sister parties. How Donald Trump would handle our international relations is of huge concern to me. I very much worry that he has proven he has a thin skin, and international relations are a delicate situation, and that if he feels slighted, that could change our entire policy towards a particular country. You're giving somebody nuclear codes that I don't know if I would trust to handle my dinner. I mean, this is the crux of the issue for me, on top of the fact that I don't think he presents any of the moral standard that we should expect from a candidate. I am very concerned. And unfortunately for us as a party, there is, when it comes to the separation of powers, the president does have a lot of power when it comes to our international relations, much more than Congress. A lot of the issues we've talked about, honestly, it's more up to Congress to make those decisions, and then the president just signs it into law, but that is decided by our representatives. But when it comes to international relations, then the president goes and speaks on our behalf as a country. And while Congress can make some binding rules and decide, we want to support this agenda or that agenda, a lot of those decisions are made by the State Department, which is, of course, run by the White House. So, like you, I am very worried about what this could mean for us as a country. My greatest hope is that that Donald Trump would put really good advisors in. Obviously, we've had a great string of Republicans who've done a very good job in foreign policy, and great negotiators, and people that he could pull in that could hopefully keep him centered. But that's all I've got. That's my greatest hope for a Donald Trump presidency, is that we just get really good people and just surround him, and then he never talks to anybody. So I'm particularly worried about things like Putin, the Russian president that he said he admires, and Putin says he admires him. And we're definitely in a very, if not a Cold War situation, a really awkward, we don't really like each other kind of thing going on right there. We've got the Middle East, which of course is an incredibly complicated and delicate situation. And based on his general understanding of conservative policy, I'm not sure he's going to get all the nuances there. So I could go on and on, but it is definitely concerning. I don't know what the right answer is, because it's not like we can say, oh, well, Paul Ryan will just step in and take care of that for us, because that's not the way that it works. I could hope that we get a really good Secretary of State. We could bring back Condoleezza Rice. I don't know. That would be much better. But for me, This is a place where, even though Republicans have always been strong on national defense, and in the chart that hopefully you'll tweet out later that you sent over in our questions, shows that Republicans tend to think that terrorism is much more major issue than the other parties. And I think that's actually why they become Republicans, is because the national defense is such an issue for them, then they think Republicans can handle it. Unfortunately, when it comes to foreign policy, Hillary's the only one with a track record here. And her track record coincides with some of the things that Republicans believe in. So we're kind of at a little bit of a crux in the road. So for conservatives who are strong,
well, I know we're going a little bit over time. Hopefully you're both okay for just a few more minutes. So much ground to cover, and I know we're just scratching the surface, but everything is just so vital at this point. Clifton, obviously Hillary Clinton supporter. She does have, experience with foreign policy. What are you secure in your thought behind Hillary Clinton that she's able to take on the task at hand? And as a woman, I'm a woman speaking on behalf of a woman. Do you think that the other men across the world who that she's going to have to, obviously be in negotiation with and talks with are going to respect her enough to allow her to, run the ship, run this country, and be able to take it on full force?
Well, first, I'd like to say it's a rare joy for me to sit here and hear a Republican make the case why the Republican candidate for president should not be president. I'm really enjoying that. You're making my job very easy. So I appreciate that. But to answer your question, Chelsea, I feel very secure with the notion of Hillary Clinton being commander-in-chief. And I feel very secure with her ability to interact on the world stage with leaders of both genders. I think that everybody understands that the United States of America is the most powerful country on the face of the earth, and you've got to respect our president. There's no way around this. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. I'm not concerned at all about what kind of reception she's going to get from men, because honestly, she's the one wielding the power here, and that's the bottom line. So I am not at all concerned about that as an issue. I feel very strongly that Hillary Clinton, with her vast international relations experience, is going to be able to hit the ground running and to work productively with foreign leaders in dealing with the issues that beset the world, including terrorism, of course, but also various other issues around the world, the issues that we have, as Katrina mentioned, with Putin and Russia, and some of the aggression that we're seeing from China in its neighborhood. So I think that Hillary Clinton will present a very, very strong face to the world.
Wonderful. Yes.
Chelsea, can I add one more thing to kind of save my face as a Republican? Can I add like a small, I think that we haven't talked about, or at least I haven't mentioned, but definitely should be. Obviously, a lot of Republicans, one of the biggest concerns, the reason that I think that Hillary's track record as Secretary of State doesn't help her out, besides the fact that Benghazi happened, which a lot of Republicans are going to continue to bring up again and again and again and dog her with. There is the question of her emails. A lot of people on the Republican side of the aisle believe that she's a national security risk. So she does have some things that she has to overcome when it comes to our foreign policy, for sure. And I think they're legitimate things, that the concerns that Republicans have about whether our secrets are safe with her. And so I think this is just more proof that we have such a difficult situation that we're in as a country right now, where you've got two candidates with such strong negatives going into a presidential election, coming off of what was pretty much a surefire win for the Democrats with President Obama.
What seems to be difficult is really influencing the millennial generation to take action and actually vote. I always say that I don't know, when an app is going to be, launched that we could just download it on our iPhone and vote for who we want to be the next president. I know that sounds great, but I'm sure it's a lot easier said than done. But I mean, that leads me into the next question. How do millennials have a real opportunity to impact the election? For those people who think my vote doesn't matter, one vote's not going to count. And if we all have that mindset, then that would be a terrible thing. Especially with the ability that we do have the freedom to vote, we do have the freedom to have our own opinion. So, Kristen, if the millennials could actually rally behind whoever they wanted to be the next commander-in-chief, what impact could they have on the actual result of the election?
Well, I mean, you're talking about millions of young voters who don't vote. I mean, most elections are decided by a few million votes, and certainly by, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of votes in the crucial states for the Electoral College. So I think that, the most crucial thing that millennials can do is just vote. Traditionally, young people vote at the lowest turnout rates of any demographic. And when that happens, your issues do not get attention. People of older demographics who are more reliable voters get their issues heard, and younger people do not. So the most crucial thing you can do is the most simple thing you can do. Vote. Absolutely get out and vote. And if you can boost your numbers, you're going to have more influence. Politicians care about one thing. They care about keeping their jobs. That's it. Nothing else matters. And if you can prove that you are a credible threat to them keeping their jobs, they will pay attention to you. They're not going to pay attention to petitions. They're not going to pay attention to marches. They're going to pay attention to whether or not you vote. And so that's the most critical thing that you can do. You've got to vote. It's the only thing that matters.
Well, what's so interesting to that point is that obviously millennials, just in sheer size, we are the largest population in America. We're over 80 million strong. We have officially superseded the baby boomer generation. And
thank God.
And there was a lot of talk about millennials, help get Obama elected into the White House. So you would think that in 2016, the term millennial is everywhere and anywhere today. Not only should the presidents be trying to, appeal to the millennial mindset, consumer, voter, but, every brand, every publication, every network, they're trying to get, the millennial eyeball. So why do you think that throughout all the different campaign, rallies and debates that we've seen, that I don't think that there was a lot of millennial-oriented focus. I think we skimmed the surface about student loan debt. We skimmed the surface about the economy. We skimmed the surface about the job hoppers and the baby boomer, the boomeranging of millennials moving back in with their parents because of the economy. But I don't feel that anyone but Bernie Sanders really tackled millennials full steam ahead. Katrina, would you agree or disagree with me? I mean, I don't think that I do think that Carly Fiorina spoke the millennial language. I think she brought technology to the forefront in politics and saying that we have to utilize technology to also make change. And because government is so outdated, we need to bring it to 2016. So I do think that was speaking the millennial lingo, but she's not here anymore. So what's your opinion on the candidates that we saw or still exist? Are they speaking to the millennial people? Are they speaking our language so that we do feel, empowered or energized or invigorated to go and vote?
No, I really don't think that any of the major political candidates are doing a very good job talking to millennials, and there is something to be said about this, in the sense that a lot of politicians they don't talk to millennials because we don't go vote. They don't talk to us about our issues because we're not a reliable voter base. So why talk to us when they should talk to the people who are going to go out and possibly vote for them? And it's a two-way street. On the other hand, we should definitely go be voting, and then we can vote for the people that are talking to us. Politicians should definitely take more time to address our issues. I think Marco Rubio also tried as a Republican to address more young issues, and he was Hispanic, and so he had a different appeal. And there were a lot of young people, young conservatives that I knew that liked him, and even some Democrats who were like, you know what, it's not the worst. So you had somebody who was definitely more, but that's not who we ended up with. And the same thing with Hillary. I think Bernie Sanders really, particularly on the student loans issue, hit that very hard. And that is he's hitting a pain point for a lot of millennials. And so for that, he got a response. However, there are a lot of young Democrats who feel disenfranchised as they feel like Obama spoke to their language and then didn't follow through on some things. Now, some of our expectations were totally unrealistic, in the sense that we believed that a politician was really going to be delivering on every single thing he promised us. First of all, you can't do that when there's Republicans in Congress. It's just not possible. That's why we got a split system. But so you've got this two-way street where neither side is talking to each other, and it's got to be up to us. We should be the bigger person here and let the politicians know, no, you have to listen to us. Our issues matter. We're the people who are going to pay for your jobs in the future, like your job. So you're working for taxpayer money. So that we have to go out or it's just going to be taken for us and decisions are going to be made with or without our consent. Now, if you are worried whether your vote doesn't count, if millennials hadn't voted in the last election, Mitt Romney would be president right now. So if you were under 30, and now there's more of us, so you get even more of a choice if you go out and vote. Now, there is something to be said about if you're in a red or blue state, you are one of many, and it's very hard to tip the scales. But you can tip the scales. Again, what we were talking about, Congress. And again, all of the issues pretty much we've talked about tonight can be heavily impacted by Congress, even to a certain extent foreign policy. So you can definitely make yourself heard by voting for your Congress member, both your senator and your state representative, as well as your state congressional races as well. So, or state House and state Senate races, I should say, unless you're not bicameral. But the other thing that you can do, I would actually disagree a little bit. I think that you can be heard, maybe not through online petitions or tweeting a hashtag or even showing up to a protest, but calling your senator's office. If they get enough phone calls, I'm telling you, writing physical letters and picking up the phone and actually making a phone call, way more. We can delete emails. We do it all the time. You see them and you're like, scroll. No, I'm not reading any of those things. But if you have a piece of mail, if you literally flood a Senate office with mail, they will listen to you. They have to eventually, if their phones are ringing off the hook. I have known staff who've said, I've turned off my phone. Lindsey Graham lost, when Donald Trump put out his phone number and had all of his people calling Lindsey Graham's number, he literally did a video that went viral of him destroying his phone, getting a new one, because that was so those things actually work. So I think that you can have your voice heard on specific issues that way, but obviously go vote. I mean, both sides were begging you to vote, even though, on the whole, the young people lean to the left. I still think that there's a lot you can see in by looking at a candidate and really thinking about what issues are important to you. And, don't just listen to what you think that you are supposed to vote for, that we're supposed to be Democrat because we're young and we care about issues. There are a lot of Republicans like me. Like, if you've listened to me and said, oh, I didn't know that a Republican could think that way. There are lots of us. So do not judge us by our party label. There's plenty of people like me too that are out there. So definitely go vote, make your voice heard.
Well, I cannot thank both of you enough for all of your insight, all of your information this evening, all of your opinions, and also, subjecting yourself to discrimination. Everybody has conflicting opinions. I really appreciate it, keeping it civil and cordial and just conversational tonight. We talked about a lot of intense things. Terrorism and gun control are not easy conversations, and I really appreciate the way we were able to handle the conversations tonight. Thank you so much for spending an additional 15 minutes with me. I think we can continue throughout the hour, and we would still be going. Look at this speed. Katrina, Clifton, thank you so much for joining us. I hope this conversation was eye-opening and ear-opening for people who are confused, and also just encouraging us that much more to get involved, to pay attention to Congress, and to write emails and call your Senate, because, we can delete emails, but we have to burn paper or shred paper to get rid of that. So really great insight. Thank you so much again. And let's keep the conversation going. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens. And I think at this point we have to cross our fingers and hope for the best. But also we can take certain action. So again, thank you all. Have a great evening, Katrina and Clifton. It was a pleasure having you on tonight.
Thank you.
Have a great one. Until next Tuesday. Adios, everybody.